Cambridge 105 Radio.
Women Making Waves.
Linda, have I told you recently about what I've been doing for the last 85 days? Well, I've been on this 100-day no alcohol challenge.
You? 85 days is it now, did you say?
Yeah, it's been a revelation.
How much have you cut down? Let's get this in context.
Yeah.
Were you on at the 2 bottles of wine a day level?
I don't think it was 2 bottles a day. Well, that's the problem, isn't it? I can't remember now. No, let's be truthful. I was having probably a glass or 2 a day.
I think they would call that moderate, wouldn't they?
Yeah, I just needed a break from it. I think sometimes you get used to opening the fridge door, getting out a bottle of wine and thinking, well, I'll just have it before I start cooking, or I'll just have one with my meal.
I finished breakfast. So
yeah, I finished breakfast. Now I'll get the glass of wine. No, it wasn't like that. I needed to try to see if I could stop. It was easier than I thought.
Yeah, a couple of glasses a day it would be, yeah.
It would, wouldn't it?
Be
yeah,
fine,
yeah,
yes.
Absolutely. But I've learned that you can have a glass of something non-alcoholic and still feel as if you are having a good time. I mean, the best thing is you see everybody get completely arse over tits.
I know, and then you're the only one. You're the witness.
No, but then you can act silly because no one will remember. No one remember.
Yes.
You
that's
see?
True, actually. I hadn't thought of it that way round.
Everyone's in a stupid... Well, I say all my friends. That's a disservice to all my friends if I go socialising.
Ex-friends now.
Yeah, they don't drink like I've made them out to be. I mean, you're fine. You don't.
I don't drink very much.
You see.
And I think I didn't drink for a while, and then when I started again, it was making me feel a bit indigestion-y, or you know, when I could feel it going down.
So when I come to the 100 days, which is very soon, how am I going to have that one glass?
How are you going to, how are you going to ease yourself back in?
Is it going to be a spritz, which for the wine buffs around
That's what
here,
I drink.
Oh, right. But wine buffs think that's just awful to have.
I'm sure they do. I don't care what they think.
No, quite right.
Actually, I'm driving, you see, because we live in the middle of nowhere. I'm driving. So again, somebody has to drive.
It's been a challenge for the first 2 weeks, but obviously for you, Linda, you don't need to do that. Yeah, it would be easy. Well, it was easy. It was. But on that note, talking about challenges, we've got 2 very interesting guests, haven't we?
We have architect and interior designer Renata Drumond, very interesting lady. Who's going to be telling us how she got to where she got to. She's got her own business now. Fascinating.
And now our next guest is Clare Mulley. She is an award-winning public historian, author and broadcaster, and she's written some fantastic books about real women in history, and particularly the Second World War. Absolutely fascinating. We're really looking forward to listening to her as well.
You're listening to Women Making Waves radio show and podcast, brought to you by Suzie Thorpe and Linda Ness. This show is all about women doing extraordinary things.
Our guest today is Brazilian-born architect Renata Drumond, founder of Renata Drumond Interior Design in Cambridge. Now, Renata's passion for design began early, building houses for her Barbie doll and experimenting with different materials. She studied architecture in Brazil, then completed her master's degree in London, working on projects in Switzerland, the Middle East and London. Now, this journey led her to fall in love with interior design. Welcome, Renata, to Women Making Waves.
Hi, Renata.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here today and share a bit of my journey and a few stories with you.
Excellent, excellent.
What does it mean, Renata, to be the founder of a company and, of course, most importantly, an interior design company in Cambridge?
Well, it is very different from working to a practice, I would say, which when I decided to start my own business, I didn't think much about that. I just wanted to have a bigger impact or more say on what I was designing and have a closer relationship to the people I was designing to. So I didn't really think about the business behind the interior design projects or architecture. And yeah, it's quite eye-opening what happened afterwards.
Is that all the financial side and stuff like that?
All the financial side, business development, marketing, selling yourself, because you get so engrossed on the projects that you're working on and that the business side stays a bit neglected. And then with time, I found out that, well, it won't survive that way. So, and then it's only been very recently, really, that I decided to almost divide the company into two and be overlooking the design process and the clients, of course, but giving more design power to people that work with me so I can concentrate on the business side. So it's all very new, that respect. I'm still very hands-on, but the difference is very extreme. But it's something that I find myself enjoying more and more, something to be able to do, the business itself.
That's really interesting, Renata, because, for a moment there, I was expecting you to say, I've handed over the business side to someone else so that I can concentrate more on the artistic side. But you've chosen not to do that.
I'm still obviously completely involved in it, and it's part of what I love doing. As I said, the business side was neglected for quite some time, and I was just working with recommendations and, from other clients. So there was nobody new, if you like, coming to us in that respect. So the business needed some attention. But now I've got a nice little team that work with me, and I overlook the whole process as a design director. But it's also very important to let go of some aspects of it as well, because, of course, there is the concept which I'm completely integrated in, and it's something that I develop with the team. But after that, they are able to run and help me deliver the project, if you like. So yes, I'm still an integral part of the design process, but I've been finding, and that's very recent, as I said, having fun as well on the business side, which to me, in the very beginning, when I started the business, it was something really unachievable, it's something really that I didn't want to be part of. I find it really fun now.
This is your company, this is your baby now, but you started off training to be an architect. I just want to go a little bit further back, actually, because as I mentioned in your intro, you were building houses for your Barbie doll. Now, most little girls at the time were probably buying clothes for their Barbie doll, but you were actually building houses. So did your parents recognize that you were not an ordinary Barbie doll user?
I believe they did early on, but, well, we come from a middle-class family. And architecture for us was something a bit we didn't know much of. So it wasn't until close to the time that I went to university that I found out that there was a course for me, that there was a course that mixed, art and building for people and, putting together the things that I like to do. And with the Barbie dolls, yes, we didn't used to buy the Barbie doll houses. I used to love to build them. So I would build from, cardboard, from any materials I used to have, or leftover bits of construction if there was anything going on in the house, or wood, and build the houses themselves, the furniture. But I never thought of much of it, obviously, until I was actually studying architecture, until I found out about architecture. So as I said, it was not something we knew existed. My parents, they wanted me to pick something safer, if you like medicine, in Brazil. So, maybe not now, luckily, the generations, they are, it's a bit less of that, but you are either a doctor or you are a lawyer, some kind of this type of profession. And me wanting to do something more artistic, it was not something that they had envisaged, no. And then I decided to do architecture, to study architecture, and it was really eye-opening. The 5 years of hard work in university, studying all different subjects, putting everything together, the things I enjoyed doing. Of course, some of them I didn't really like it, but I did it anyway. And yes, it was very eye-opening to what's available and what's out there in the world.
And what about school, Renata? Were you encouraged to go into architecture at school? Was it considered something that women would go into to study?
I want to say not really. So definitely not encouraged in the school I was in. It was courses like, as I said, medicine, dentistry, law. They were much more encouraged. So when I decided to do architecture, out of, let's say, 100 students, maybe 2 picked architecture. So it's really, yes. Back then, hopefully, I think today is completely different. People know more about the profession, what entails. And still today, I still find myself trying to explain what it is, because most people know what an architect does, but many people don't know what an interior designer does and
Interesting.
how wide the umbrella is, how much we can actually take on a project and how much we can enhance the spaces and, how much we can do.
Surely having an architectural background that then marries with your interior design part to it, surely that must be an incredible win-win for your clients, as long as they know your background. Is that something you have to sort of get across, that you have two parts to your skills?
Yes, it's something that I tend to, I like to bring it up, but it's not on my elevator pitch of my introduction line. I think because to me it's so integrated to what I do. So I see what I do as much more than maybe interior architecture would relate to it a bit more. But yes, I do agree with you. It is certainly something different, and it's certainly something that explains a lot to the things that I like the most to do. I love going to sites. I love being part of the job when it's happening, learning from the skillful people that we bring to site and learning all the different aspects of it. I love the technical as much as I love the final specification of colors and materials and furniture and lighting and fixtures. So I do like it all, the whole process, if you like. So I always tell my clients, get me in from the beginning. When you get your architect, when you get your first plans, get us to be part from the first set off of the layout, or when you're thinking about getting your properties even. Many a times we were taken to, especially in London, to flats in London, to see, what can I do with this space? I don't know if I buy this flat or that flat, and we'll be able to help. I mean, that flat you can actually do this, doing feasibility studies on the layout plan. So it's much more than getting to the place and coming with the final decoration aspects of it. It's much more technical than that. It's much more transformative than that. That's what I wanted to say. It's a very transformative thing to be doing to anyone's life and anyone's space, I guess. Yes.
And you were saying, that a lot of people don't know, and I think you're absolutely right. I really wasn't sure what interior designers did, but there has been quite an interesting television programme that's running at the moment called Interior Design's Masters with Alan Carr on BBC. And I don't know if you've caught any of those programmes, but that's kind of interesting. Some of the things that they do are really out there, a bit over the top for my taste, and some of it's really good. But that's just me. I don't know if you've been watching that, but really interesting stuff. And it makes you kind of watch that and go, wow, that must be a brilliant job to do. It just looks amazing. Do you find it quite hard to stick to what the people want, or do you ever push the boundaries and get them to think about doing things slightly differently to the way that they're thinking about it?
I think that's why they hire a professional like us. If they knew exactly what they wanted, or if they knew exactly how to do things, they would have done it, in a different way. So I think what professionals like us can bring is the vision, and we can help put it all together. And we can help deliver in an amazing way, and maybe even things that you haven't thought of. I got many times, obviously, part of the job, a big part of the job is the concept of the project, independent of what the project is. If it's more residential, if it's an apartment, if it's a big residential, if it's a hospitality project, an office project, they always start with a very solid foundation, which we call it's the heart of the project. And we do that by spending time with the client, understanding their vision, understanding how they use this space, their lifestyle. Some of them come with ideas of colors. They are all incorporated, but it is our duty to deliver them the best way possible. It is extremely important to listen and to understand what that particular client wants from the particular project. And we take big pride in it. And I also take a long time. So it's an interesting process to understand what people want. And sometimes they tell you things that they want. They come with certain words for you and some vision that they have. And we are able to translate it, and we produce a very solid concept of what we think the vision is and how we can better their vision, and sometimes deliver things that they haven't thought of before. And I think that's why, I know that's why they come to us. So there is a lot of time spent on that beginning of the project trying to get that concept condensed in one beautiful document that we all agree on. And that document is then the root of the project, and it is then journey map that we're going to follow. And then, of course, the other stages follow through after that. Again, I always tell my clients, nothing is set in stone. Flexibility is key, but also the way they want to approach their projects as well. The thing is, just going off route a little bit, we work with people, and people are the most beautiful thing to work with because they are all different. They have emotions, and it's their houses, it's their businesses, it's their restaurants, let's say, that they put a lot in. And I just love to be part of that. It's part of someone's life, and bringing something that is going to transform it.
You were talking about people. I noticed in your company that we've seen you've got 3 of you at the moment, which is you, Renata, Celia Marcos, and Ramsha Nassim, all women. Do you find that when you were training to be an architect, and obviously you went on to do interior design, did you see a lot more women training to be architects?
My experience, it was very, very similar in numbers. We do see less of
good.
us, unfortunately, in director positions, which is unfortunate, but that's in companies. But my university, as I said, it was in Brazil. And back then, probably 50-50, 60-40, nothing too disparate. Taking the interior design masters, though, I believe there was slightly more women, maybe, but only slightly. But again, yes. So I would say that the profession itself, the course itself, universities, from my experience, probably not. But what I see is men in higher positions in different companies.
Yeah. That's what a lot of women say as well, actually. It tends to be the men that get to the top, but not in yours. I was really interested, actually. I was in somebody's house about 2 or 3 years ago, and it was fabulous. It was absolutely beautiful. And it was actually this friend of mine, it was her mother's house. And I said to her, your mother has got the most fabulous taste. And she went, oh no, that was the interior designer that did all of that and found all these bits and pieces. And at that point, I just had a total respect for interior. I suddenly thought, yes, this is what they do. There was really interesting bits in the wall. It was just great, just fabulous. And the people that work with you, earlier on, you mentioned that you kind of let them get on with it to an extent. Although you're very involved in things, you let them run with things. I imagine they really appreciate that, actually, to be given that freedom to get on with it and input their ideas.
Well, I truly hope so. I think I think they do. I think I also put myself in the position. I worked, again, for different practices, as you mentioned. Before moving to Cambridge, I worked in London for bigger practices, and we used to do all these beautiful, amazing projects. And sometimes most of the time I find myself under somebody, and this person wanted to have complete reign constantly. Mm-hmm. And as a creative, the thing I love the most is to create. And if you don't let me create, I'm not happy.
Yeah.
So
I can imagine.
Yes.
It feels you're just a conduit in that point. You're not actually doing anything yourself if you're having to follow somebody else, and they're being quite prescriptive. I can imagine that's exactly why you went on your own, really.
And sometimes you want to create and you want to push the boundary a bit, and then somebody within your company reins you in. And I really try to fight against that impulse that sometimes I have. I don't have it too much, to be honest, because I always, with every client, I always push the boundaries, and I always try to find where the line is. And because it's important for them, to their project to be exquisite, to be successful in my eyes, it needs to be on the pushing boundary line, if you want. Enough of beige on beige and grays on grays. Let's get some personality. Let's get the client's personality into it. Let's do something fun. I'm always a big advocate in the studio for that. I always listen. There are, of course, sometimes budget constraints, and we play with all that. Time constraints is always a big thing. And that will play a big part on the creative process. But many a times, we have creative meetings or project meetings. On the website, I've got 3 women, but I also have somebody that works with me remotely in Brazil, which is a man, Lever, and he's extremely talented. And he works with us on the 3D visuals, the visualization. So Here's part of the creative process in the studio when we get to that stage of building the 3D images. We call it design development. So that's after the concept study. So I'll ask them, so what do you think it should be? And I think it should be that way. And then let's say Celia and Levy think otherwise, and then we go with their idea and see what the client says. The client will be the final voice in it. And it's a collaborative process. I don't know it all. I don't claim to know it all. I know some stuff, but I'm always open to see how other minds work.
So I'm thinking now of younger women, well, younger men and women, especially women at the moment. If they're listening to you today, what would you say to a younger generation if they are wanting to get into architecture and primarily interior design? But architecture, I'm interested as well.
I would most definitely encourage. It's a beautiful profession. It's a very needed profession. It's, in the future. Looking at the future, looking at the cities that we live in, looking at people. But many people see interior design as maybe something that is luxurious or maybe even superfluous, but it's not. It's most definitely not. It impacts your well-being. It impacts your everyday life. And this is so important. I'm always also saying, we don't need a huge budget to transform your space. Small transformations, in small touches in a space, they go a long way. And it's so, so important. So I would say, yes, go into it. Yes, go into it with a fresh mind. Try to have people, human beings, in your mind when you are designing. What do you want to experiment? What you want to feel? Trying to create feelings and create experiences when people are inside the space that you created. I think that is, to me, the most important thing about what I do. And the human-centric side of it. I think that's actually, for me, it's the heart of everything that I do. If it does not have the impact on people, then I think it's not being successful.
I'm kind of imagining that you must have, at some point, come across a job or a space that's been quite tricky to work with, and maybe one that you didn't really like very much yourself. How do you cope with that kind of challenge?
I think you feel a bit deflated, especially I think, and because the success of a project is measured in many different ways. I mean, the most important, obviously, is the client and how did it impact their lives? Are they happy in it? Did they achieve what they expected? But I think there's also, budget, timeline, especially if we talk about hospitality projects. Sometimes you work in boutique hotels and restaurants that need to be open by a certain time. And if you don't, live up by the budget and live up by the timeline, that you're a bit less successful. But I would say the ones that I did in the beginning of my career, I would say they were less successful in the sense that I knew I could have pushed the boat out a bit more. And for one reason or another, maybe because I didn't feel, in my 20s, I didn't feel quite confident to say, okay, what about this? What about that? Let's just try and, imagine the space differently. Let's add some color here. Let's be a bit innovative and different. And let's put more personality to your space, more of you into the space. And maybe trying to deliver exactly what they wanted instead of showing what they could have.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Maybe playing it safe would have been something that I regretted looking back. But again, it's all a journey, isn't it?
Yeah, it's all experience. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I'm just interested in what you said earlier about how important it is for your well-being when you have when I say well-designed, obviously it's going to be well-designed from you because you are the professional. But if you go to anyone's house and see some cohesion and some planned room that actually works really well, it is good for the soul, isn't it? It is good for the mind. It is good for when you come back from work or somewhere, and that is your luxury to come home to a really well thought room that makes you relax, makes you want to sit down. That's really important, and I hadn't really thought about that till you said earlier how important it is to make sure that the room or the interior works for you or your client.
Absolutely. And if your project didn't deliver that, then it has not been successful. I mean, I suppose it's simple as that. That's why it's so important to get to know the client. That's why I am so against this copy and paste solutions that we see. We see in some different places that we visit. We've seen that before. Obviously, I'm not saying you're going to reinvent the wheel in every project, but every project is very unique because it is made for somebody different, and you should understand your client. And in every project that we work on, of course, they are very different. There is a bit of me as well, or a bit of us, or a bit of things that we think are important. That's why the client came to us in the first place. For example, you go to your friend's house, it's very well designed, it's thought of, everything works, everything is in the place that it feels it should be. You know, that little nook, that corner that works as a reading nook, the color that you use that, sometimes reflects the light, some materials that were used, they're all being thought through. But also, can you see a bit of your friend in that interior?
Bit of your friend.
Yeah, or the person that inhabits that space. Can you see a bit of it? We've very recently been commissioned our first commercial project in terms of offices. We have done restaurants before, but we are now working on an office space, which for me is very different. I love to have these different projects because our main experience is in large residential projects. By having an office, we were able to bring a fresh view into office space. This is a family business. So we talked with the family, we understood the history of the business. We were able to put that into the interiors. So not that copy and paste solution you see everywhere, but something different, something unique to that business, if it makes any sense. There is our skills and expertise on the project, obviously, because of the solutions, the layout we created, the design solutions we created and offered, but I hope that every project that we work on has the client into it as well.
I think you're right. That's the absolute key to the thing. Where do you see this business in maybe 10 years' time? Do you see it as growing into a large business, or do you think its beauty is in staying quite small?
I think the beauty is definitely staying small. It's a little bit bigger than we are now, so we can cover a bit more ground. Although we're such a small team, but we cover a lot of ground. I always say this to everybody because we are so hands-on on every aspect of the project. So we on site all the time. We follow things through with the client, from the very start of concept art to delivery to. In some projects, we go all the way to concierge services in the sense that we choose their towels and, cutlery. You don't have to go all that way, but some clients really do want input on that too. So I do see it as more because we are very hand-to-hand with the clients. So it's very personal. The approach is very personal. You're always dealing with me. I'm always the first point of contact. And I think it will always be like this because I like dealing with the client directly, unless something very big changes, but I don't see it because it's very personal. So I can't, we wouldn't be able to have an enormous amount of projects a year, and I wouldn't be able to give the attention that I like to give to every client having 20 projects under my belt.
Renata, when do you stop taking your work home? So if you're going to a friend's house, you haven't seen a friend for a long time, and you go in and you think, oh my goodness, I could do a lot with this room. Do you have to bite your lip? Do you have to think, it's not for me to go in and tell them that actually I could do so much more for this room?
No, I never say anything. But of course, unsurprisingly, there's always questions on what should I do and what do you think? Where should I put,
Right, so you do get those answers.
Of course I do. We all do, don't we? It doesn't really matter what we do. We all, I've got other friends as well, accountant friends that ask about accountancy.
But do you have to be truthful though? Do you have? Someone says, "Look, what do you think of my new sofa?" And you walk in and think, "Oh my goodness, it's really not that good." Do you just have to be very, very safe and not give an opinion? But maybe I don't know. I mean, for me, taking home mine too. If I loved it so much like you do, oh gosh, that'd be hard going to somebody else's house and thinking I could do a much better job.
Your sofa's awful. That's what you'd be like.
Off you go. I'll replace it.
No, it really, of course, it depends. But I will always, I'm always truthful, but I I'm kind. I'm kind. I'm kind, Susie. So, I know. And I also, normally they will ask me where to go, and my budget is so and so, where to go. We have a very big black book of suppliers and contacts and contractors and consultants that we call them. So we know a lot of places you can go to get your sofa. Normally they come to me before they buy the sofa, which is good. But if they have already, then the advice...
Then what do you
exactly.
do?
So the advice would be to, what can we do with that sofa? Because you know what? So many times I also get clients, and I really encourage that as well. They have some pieces in their home that they want to keep. It's family heirloom, sometimes they're not the most expensive bit. So they want to keep,
Or the most
yes,
desirable.
exactly. But it's, I think I always say the most important thing is whether that object is interesting or adds value or is important to you, and then we work around it. You don't have to buy. And also I don't encourage anybody, right, client or no client, to buy everything new. Before I move in, everything is new and everything is from. I don't encourage that. I think you need to live there. Sometimes you think the sofa has to be that way, or that chair has to be that big, or your dining table has to be that big. But I encourage you to live a little bit and then think about it. Rather than just buy.
Well, actually, Renata, that's interesting. You just mentioned about reusing furniture, because that really is what things are coming to now.
Absolutely.
Sustainability, and making sure that it isn't always new, that we do actually move things around. People, if one person doesn't like we're going for a sofa again here, but if one particular person doesn't like the sofa, then that sofa can go to another house. And so it is really important. Do you find that that's creeping into your sphere of work now, that people are wanting to keep something, or finding they are buying secondhand?
No, not yet, unfortunately. I do find I am the one that's pushing it normally, unless it's an heirloom, an antique. Most of the interiors we do are modern, contemporary, but there is that a family heirloom, and sometimes people want to hide it. No, you should, it's part of your family. This comes with the history. Let's integrate it. Your interior is contemporary. You don't have to have everything in contemporary style for it to match. It's going to look lived. It's going to look meaningful, which is extremely important word in interiors and interior design. Something needs to be meaningful. If it's not meaningful, then it makes you question, why are you doing that? Why are you keeping that piece? But yeah, I find myself encouraging more and more. Love going to auctions, going to upholsterers, for example, that have get a second hand reupholster and then bring a new life into pieces. I think they are quite special, and always encourage having that special piece, whether it's a family heirloom that you've got, whether it's that beautiful sculptural chair that you have in the corner with this loud fabric that brings everything together, brings some interest. So as I was saying, I think most important is not being particularly beautiful to everybody, but to be interesting and cause some interest. Now I have in my house, I've got some pieces of artwork. And so I debate myself the years and years of having it, looking at it and thinking, do I like this? This is a bit strange. But when I go past it, it interests me. It catches my eye. It makes me think. So I think that's very important to me in a space. It's always something that interests you, something that triggers something to you, not necessarily always beautiful feelings or something that is absolutely beautiful for everybody, but something that intrigues you. I think that's important too.
I think you're absolutely right, and I think the shopping bit is a bit I would like, actually, Renata. I think I would love going around sales rooms and looking for different bits and pieces. That's the bit that would appeal to me about interior designing. But Renata, it's been lovely speaking to you, and really informative as well. Actually, I've learned loads about interior design listening to you.
It's been great.
Thank you very much for chatting to us today, and all the best with the business, Renata Drumond.
Thank you very much, ladies.
You're listening to Women Making Waves radio show and podcast, brought to you by Suzie Thorpe and Linda Ness. This show is all about women doing extraordinary things.
Our guest today is the award-winning public historian, author and broadcaster Clare Mulley. Clare's 4 biographies so far primarily focus on female experience during the Second World War. Clare has given TEDx talk at Stormont, spoken at the Houses of Parliament, Royal Albert Hall, Imperial War Museum, National Army Museum and the British Library, as well as festivals, military intelligence colleges, schools, universities, airfield schools. The list goes on. Welcome, Clare Mulley, to Women Making Waves.
It's lovely to be here. Thank you for having me on.
So, Clare, how crucial is it to restore the overlooked stories of women in history? And why have you made it your mission?
Oh, well, it's obviously very crucial. There is a rich seam of untold women's history. And actually, when I was doing my new book, Agent Zoe, Zoe was a mathematician, and I think she'd have liked this story I came across, which was during the Second World War, when America entered the war at the end of 1941, they used to monitor their returning aircraft for bullet holes, because they had a team of mathematicians in New York who would look to see where these bullet holes were concentrated, and then they could work out where to put most of the heavy armor plating, because they wanted to keep these vehicles as light as possible for their duties. And they found they were mostly in the wings and the tail. And then it was actually an Austrian-Hungarian Jewish mathematician who joined the team who asked this question: where are the missing bullet holes? And the answer is, of course, that if your aircraft is shot in the cockpit or in the engines, it's not coming back at all. And this insight changed the way that they did their aircraft armoring. Now, I think we can use this as a metaphor for military history. I think we're quite good at retelling and getting more details of the stories we know quite well. The great set pieces of the Second World War. I think we're much less good at asking, where are the missing stories? And if you start looking at that, it gives you this completely new insight into the war and the very diverse resources, human resources as well, that it ultimately took collectively to bring victory for the Allies. So I think it's really important we tell this story, not just as women's history, but as the history of the war.
That's a really interesting story. That's really thinking outside the box, isn't it? Not the ones that are coming back, but the ones that are not coming back, and where could the bullet holes be in there? You've written a lot about the Second World War. Why is that period so interesting to you? Is there a reason for that, or is it just that the women you want to write about happened to be around then?
I love all history. I would love to write. I love to write about the men. All my books feature lots of very interesting, great men, terrible men, the whole range as well. And, when I get the chance, I like to read a bit of classical or whatever, all sorts of periods. But I do think the wars are interesting because war, is traditionally seen as a naturally male sphere. And yet war actually often subverts the usual sort of or accepted social structures. And women were particularly used they were used in a whole range of roles, but particularly in special operations, in resistance, and the SOE, for example, as special agents, because of their gender. Specifically. So a lot of women who found that they were expected to dance the Polonaise in Warsaw or grow up, doing whatever, finally found they had an opportunity to serve behind or on the front line. And the reason why they were so important, the great special skill, I always think of it as the superpower that the women had. It's often said to me, of course, it's their sexual allure, but it's not. It's not about being a honey trap. The superpower women had in the 1940s, and to some degree still have this, is their ability to be overlooked and underestimated. And so women could go in, able-bodied men, particularly of conscription age, are always going to be automatically suspicious if they're moving around occupied territory. But women were moving around all the time, looking after family businesses, looking after their families, and they were disregarded to a significant extent. I mean, of course, ultimately, the Germans found out what was going on, and women faced the same threats, the same horrendous ends as the men. So it was the same dangers, but there was this advantage, particularly early on.
Clare, why study history? What's been the defining moment that inspired you to write about women in history?
Well, history, I studied both of my degrees, are history degrees. I haven't managed a third one. I don't think I'm going to. I want to. And I always wanted to write. I just love sitting. I'm quite a loner at times. Well, I don't know if that's true, actually, but anyhow, I love it. But I could never think of plots, and dialogue was elusive, and I found I wasn't particularly good at it. So I've got a few of those top drawer, I'm never going to see the light of day pieces of paper. And then I started working at Save the Children, it's the world's leading independent children's development agency. And I came across this story about the founder, this fabulous woman called Eglantine Jebb. This is my first book. It actually touches on the First World War rather than the Second. She was one of those pioneering Edwardian women who wouldn't take no for an answer. She gets arrested. She has a go at the royal family and the government of the day, and she conducts her own defence in court. And she's absolutely inspirational. And I also loved her because she didn't like children very much. She didn't fit into this role of maternalism at all. She was out there to make a difference to the world. And she was part of that wave after the First World War. Let's never let this happen again. Let's invest in the next generation. So she had incredible foresight, and no one had told her story, partly because she was a woman, that's enough, but partly also because she was probably gay or bisexual. And this was seen as completely, couldn't talk about that for such a long time. I mean, she died in 1928. And I remember when I was researching this, the British Mint said, let's have a new coin and a new note and let's put a woman on them. And I was like, yeah, great. And then they opened it up to the public. Fantastic. And then they ended up putting Jane Austen on both. Now, I love Jane Austen. Okay, she's fantastic. But we've got more than one woman who achieved great things and deserves some recognition. So that's what set me off, really.
If you found something really heinous about one of the women that you were researching, would it put you off? Do you need to like the women you write about?
No, I think it's very important that you don't necessarily choose to like them. I mean, I have mostly written about, well, they're all strong women and most of them are heroes, but not all of them actually. And I think it's really important that we look on both sides of the war. So I did the book on Eglantine Jebb called The Woman Who Saved the Children. Luckily enough, it won the Daily Mail Prize for Biography, so that was great. So I thought I'd crack on, but I moved forward a war so I could interview some veterans and witnesses. And I wrote a book called The Spy Who Loved, which was my bestseller, which was about the first woman to serve Britain as a special agent in the Second World War, Christina Skarbek or Christine Granville. And that's done pretty well. So my agent was like, great, let's do more. There must be other women. Well, okay, there were 39 women who went to France alone. But I kind of felt I'd told that story, and I thought it would be really important to try and look at, well, what were women doing on the other side? How was Hitler able to corral his resources, including his human resources, to support his criminal ends? And my next book was called The Women Who Flew for Hitler. And there were only 2 women who served the Nazi Third Reich as test pilots. One of them was a fanatical Nazi. She's fairly well known. Her name is Hannah Reich. And the other one was actually secretly part Jewish, and by halfway through the war, she's secretly in the resistance. So Hannah Reich tried to save Hitler's life, and the other one, Melita von Stauffenberg, her surname gives you a bit of a clue as to who she is, she actually tried to kill him. So they ended their lives on opposite sides of history. And in a sense, you get this wonderful way to tell the story from sort of almost 360 degrees from the German side. And I thought that was, we should know that story more.
We mentioned in the intro, Claire, that you spent time talking to pupils at schools about your books. And so what surprises you the most from the responses of pupils about women in your books, bearing in mind that these women are real women in real history?
Yeah, absolutely. So I do a different version of my talks for schools. We sort of change it around a bit. But I mean, I'm mainly talking to secondary schools. Occasionally I do a junior school, but that's a very different thing. But they are actually surprisingly brilliant, and they ask really good questions, and they get really engaged with it, and they end up, I quite often get teachers saying, oh great, we've done a whole project on this or something. It's absolutely fantastic. But for secondary schools, they're the toughest audience. So normally if I give a talk, I can get maybe a gasp, maybe a laugh, I don't know, I get some sort of response from the audience, and that's really fantastic. I love it, because every talk is different. I kind of respond to the audience as well. It's brilliant. But in a school, they're totally silent because they're terrified that they're going to laugh at the wrong moment, or someone's going to go, oh, they responded, and then that'll be picked up in the playground. So they're absolutely horrified. And then all the lads tend to go out, and all the girls come around and they go, oh my goodness, that's amazing. Can I get your book? And the girls really get into it. But actually, sometimes later, I get a little email from some of the guys as well. So I think it does all go in, and I think kids do respond to it. I think they expect it to be quite a boring history lecture, and it's not, because these lives aren't boring. Most of my talks are for adults, though.
And I'm interested in how you do your research. I think I read that you said you like to go on holiday and be in the places that the people had been in, and pick up some essence of them. Is that how do you do your research?
That is a part of it. Yeah, I think it's very important. It's something I got from Antonia Fraser. I don't know her, but I do admire her as a biographer, and she calls it optical research, which makes it sound quite scientific. But as far as I can tell, it's basically going out there and driving around, and actually you can really pick up stuff. I mean, obviously, a lot of my subjects have been overseas nationals. Some of them have taken British citizenship later, but were born overseas. So in Poland and Germany and France. And so I think it's really important to go out there and put in your eye line what they saw. Go to visit those places and you can really pick up a different sense of suddenly it sort of slots into place. Oh, that's why they parachuted there, because this is there, or there's an escape line there, or whatever. You can really begin to tell, but also it's the serendipity that goes with that. As in, I often go to all the national archives and the small local archives, parish archives and so on. But also, like once I was nearly arrested by the Wehrmacht when I came out of a building I was staying in. And it turned out they were very angry, actually. Some chap with a handheld machine gun came running up to me and started jabbing his machine gun in my throat. And he was in the Wehrmacht uniform and I was virtually in tears. It was one of the most scary moments during my research ever.
Wow.
But it turned out that they were filming a World War II series and I hadn't understood the poster saying, don't come out of these rooms between 8 and 10. And yet even that taught me something, because I knew that my subject, Christina Skarbek, had been arrested more than once, but she had always kept her cool. Unlike me, nearly, jelly on the floor. She had talked her way out of trouble. Her brain was amazing, her sang-froid. And so even that brought home to me something of the realities of what she was facing, because she wasn't walking into a film set. She was, part Jewish, a British special agent serving behind enemy lines in Nazi-occupied Poland at that point, later in Nazi-occupied France. So even that can help to bring you some sort of different insight into what you're doing.
Absolutely. I mean, that must have been incredible, because it really did put you in their shoes just for that moment until you realized it wasn't real. For them, that moment was all too real, I guess.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And yet she managed to talk her way out of trouble. On that occasion, actually, she was arrested, and what she did, she had a cough. She was a bit coldy at the time. And what she did was she decided to make a virtue of her apparent weakness. And so she bit her own tongue, and not a little, but hard and repeatedly. And then when she coughed, it was like she was coughing up blood. And that was the symptoms of TB, tuberculosis. And there was no cure for TB at this moment. And it's carried by waterborne droplets. So basically, your interrogation and TB do not go well together. So the Nazis threw her out. And they did follow her, but she managed to get away. And it just, to have the presence of mind to come up with that when you're facing brutal interrogation, fearing you're going to betray your colleagues, expecting to be shot. And yet she got away with that. Whereas I know I'd be a terrible special agent. No sense of direction anyhow. So
what an incredible story. What an incredible story. And you received the Polish cultural honour, the Beni Merito.
I did. I feel very honoured.
Very exciting, yes.
It was wonderful. Yes, the Polish Foreign Minister, Radek Sikorski, he was now again the Foreign Minister, and I met him again last week, but not another award, just a meeting, because he knew Zoe, the subject of my new book. He'd met her before, so we had a little meeting when he went to the London Defence Conference. But yes, they gave me a medal about 10 years ago now for a previous book, and obviously wear it whenever possible. In bed on my pajamas, I just think it's great.
Yeah, I think it's great as well, actually. Tell us about Agent Zoe then, the book that you've just got out at the moment.
It's about the only person to parachute from Britain to Nazi-occupied Poland in a dress, because she was the only woman to parachute from Britain to Poland during the war. She was wearing a blue silk dress, but I must say on top of that, she was wearing a cardigan and overcoat, her dropsuit overalls with 2 guns, some cyanide tablets, and an awful lot of foreign currency to give to the resistance. And then she took part in the largest act of organised defiance against Nazi Germany in the war, which was the Warsaw Uprising. So that's sort of your top line. But actually, she started off the war in uniform fighting in eastern Poland, Lwów, and then became the only female emissary to cross over 1,000 miles of occupied territory from Poland to Britain during the war, during which she was nearly arrested in Paris, nearly drowned in the water tender of a steam train in which she was hiding. She was shot at in the freezing Pyrenees. Extraordinary journey, but got to Britain, trained the special forces, did 2 other amazing missions in London, and then was parachuted back and took part. So, she's an extraordinary character.
How did you do the research for that one? Did you have family that you could speak to, or was it all through books? How did you do that?
Well, sadly, while I've been writing these books, I don't know how to put it, the human coast is eroding, if you like, and it's harder to catch some of these sources. But with her, she actually she lived quite a long time. One of my previous subjects died very young. Another one was murdered. But Zoe, she actually survived, and it turns up to be a great story, and I do love her. But that meant I met her niece, who had smuggled medals around that Zoe had got in from London for women who had served, because no one was honouring the women. Zoe said, we have to fight for women's rights and for my country. It was both of those things for her. She actually secured legal military recognition for the women in the Polish Home Army. So that's the biggest resistance movement in Europe. And that meant that the Germans had to set up prisoner of war camps for women in the first time in the war because of her work, because women then came under the Geneva Convention, so they had certain limited but some protections. So that saved thousands of lives on its own.
Out of all the women that you've researched and you've spoken to that make a very big difference in the world of history, what's been a sort of an iconic woman for you that's really stood out?
They all stood out. Eglantine Jebb set up Save the Children, which is the world's leading independent children's charity, but she also developed the concept of children's rights. Before her, children under the age of 18 didn't have rights. They were wards of the state or parental. Every country in the world, apart from one, has signed up to that. It's the most universally accepted human rights instrument in history. I mean, she's amazing.
Your books, Clare, brilliantly put women back into history where they belong. Have you seen a move to bring back women in history in schools?
I hope so. But I do think the national conversation is changing a little bit, and hopefully in two ways. When I started writing, when we thought of the resistance, we tended to think of France, and there are extraordinary stories, amazing history in France, the French resistance, and the SOE women, 39 women sent out to France. We are beginning to tell those stories a bit more. But I think we're much less good at looking east, and two of my books now look at what was happening on the Eastern Front, or women that came from Poland or served in occupied Poland as well as elsewhere. And I actually think that this is really important history. And if you look at what's happening today, I mean, it's one of the things that I spoke with Foreign Minister Radek Sikorski about last week, was the immediate resonance of some of that history to what's happening today with the Russia-Ukraine war. In fact, when I was writing an early chapter about Agent Zoe, she's in uniform. She's in Lvov, which is now Lviv in Ukraine. Which was then in eastern Poland. And she does many things, ack and digging trenches, all sorts of things. But this moment she was making petrol bombs in the basement of a sports hall to throw against advancing tanks, initially the Germans, but then the Soviet tanks that came in from the east, and because Poland was invaded on both sides. And then I stopped and I went to get some lunch. I put on Radio 4, and it was literally interviews with women working in the basement of a municipal building, making petrol bombs to throw against a Russian invading force into Ukraine across that same border. So, I mean, it's really immediate. And I think we need to consider that history isn't other history. That's part of our history. It's a collective war story. Normally when I tweet, I put a hashtag shared history, and that's shared across gender, but it's also shared geographically. And we need to be better at looking at both those things.
The imminent release of your book, Agent Zoe, it's coming out. Have you got lots of things planned? Are you doing lots of tours and whatnot?
Yeah, I've got a bit coming up. So we launched it. We had a couple of events at the Imperial War Museum in their atrium, which was absolutely brilliant. And then in the Polish Club in South Ken, which was absolutely fabulous, a very different sort of feeling to it. Kindly sponsored by the Polish Embassy, and they do really good vodka. Go to Ognisko Polski and get their horseradish vodka, everyone. It's wonderful. But yes, I'm doing a bit of a book tour, so I'm going to quite a few festivals. It's all on my website, www.bearmulley.com. So please come and hear me talking. I've got a great presentation with slides, or I love being interviewed, and very happy to sign books for people. So yeah.
Now, Clare, your books have been optioned brilliantly for both film and TV. Is that correct?
Yes, they go in and out of option. Never been made.
What does it feel like? Do you have some control over the content to make sure that they will portray your real stories the way they should be portrayed through film?
A limited amount of option. I try to negotiate, can I be a historical consultant on there, but it never seems to work very well. But I'll bet Christine Granville. With that one, I did specify just the key points, that it had to be about her. She couldn't end up being, like a Bond girl, secondary to some fella. It is her narrative. She drives the action. It's about her. She had to be Polish born. I didn't want her to end up being American or something. Her mother was Jewish, and that's quite important to her story. And I wanted to make sure that those were included. So these sort of key points, but that's, big, broad brushstrokes. But, we had interest from Angelina Jolie. She wanted to play it, and then that fell through, which was sad. But I'm hopeful for another quite exciting offer on that one soon. And there's interest or options on the other one. So, yeah, it's exciting days. I would just love one of them to be finally made. They all deserve it. They're amazing stories.
They are amazing stories. They really are. It's great that you do this and you talk about the women. And what I love about it is they're all true. So it's not if it's a novel that we have to dream that this is what women can do. It is happening. It has happened. And it's an absolute possibility for all women to really do the impossible.
Absolutely. I really hope people are inspired. I often think, when I look in the archives and I find little people have penciled in the side, lots of male officers have put, once Christina was described as being absolutely fearless and someone wrote in the margin, but she terrifies me. Or, another time she's got a boyfriend with a wooden leg and he whittles out a little panel of his wooden leg to hide microfilm. You just think, well, if I was doing a novel, you just think it's far-fetched, it's made up. But the fact it's actually in the archives, it really happened. And there's so many reasons not to forget this. We need to pay tribute. We should honour these people and so on. But also, they're just damn good stories. We should know this.
Claire, it's been great. Thank you so much indeed for your time today. It's been lovely to talk to you. You are an inspiration in the sense that you love writing about real women, and that's so important. It really is important in this day and age, especially because of the wars happening at the moment. There will be so many other women that we really haven't heard about yet doing extraordinary stuff in current wars. And God forbid, wars ahead. I don't know. Let's hope not. But it's something that should be heard, and hopefully the young will get to hear about it too.
I hope so too. And thank you very much for inviting me on. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
That's all we have time for today on Women Making Waves. Our thanks go to our guests, Renata Drumond and Clare Mulley. We're always on the lookout to feature women living extraordinary lives, so please do contact us if you know someone we should be talking to.
You can contact us via social media on X and Facebook at WomenMW or on Instagram at Women Making Waves. You can also find us on cambridge105.co.uk or visit our website womenmakingwaves.co.uk, where you can hear all of our interviews.
Advice you can trust. Woodfine Solicitors offers a range of expert and award-winning legal services, whatever your problem. It's not all happy ever after for couples. Every family goes through difficult times, but Woodfine Solicitors can help you face those challenges, deal with personal crises, and get you back on track. We're upfront and transparent about our costs. Find out more at woodfines.co.uk and arrange a no-obligation chat. Woodfines. Cutting through the red tape.